Johnny Cash and I Walk the Line.
Johnny Cash, famously known as the Man in Black, from his claims of Cherokee ancestry to standing up for the Indians. Until recently, Rosanne Cash had a DNA test, and the untold truth about Johnny's heritage was revealed. Johnny Cash entered the world on February 26, 1932, in the small town of Kingsland, Arkansas, born as J.R. Cash. His name was a compromise, a middle ground between his mother's desire for the name John and his father's preference for Ray. Growing up in a family of 7 children, he found himself in the middle, navigating a household that was no stranger to hard work and struggle. Life was far from easy for the Cash family. They were a farming family trying to make ends meet during the Great Depression, an era that tested even the most resilient spirits. In 1935, seeking a better future, the Cash family moved to Dyess, Arkansas, part of a New Deal agricultural project that promised struggling families a chance to farm and rebuild their lives. It was here, in the fields of Dyess, that Johnny's childhood was shaped. His family worked tirelessly in the cotton fields, enduring long, grueling days under the sun. Amid the back-breaking labor, they found solace in music, singing together to pass the time and lift their spirits. For Johnny, this early exposure to music planted the seeds of his lifelong passion. Despite the hardships of their farming life, it was a family tragedy that left the deepest mark on young Johnny. His older brother Jack, whom he idolized, was severely injured in a gruesome table saw accident. Jack fought bravely for a week but ultimately succumbed to his injuries. This loss was devastating for Johnny. Jack had been his confidant, his role model, and his closest sibling. His death left a void that Johnny would carry with him for the rest of his life. It was during these moments of profound grief that Johnny turned to music as a way to cope with the pain and make sense of the world. As a young boy, Johnny found comfort in the hymns his mother sang and the stories she shared about hope and resilience. She encouraged his interest in music, teaching him the basics of guitar and nurturing his talent. By the age of 12, Johnny was not only learning to play but also beginning to write songs, pouring his feelings into melodies that reflected the depth of his experiences. These early compositions were raw and heartfelt, laying the groundwork for the authentic storytelling that would later define his career. The fields of Dyess, the loss of his brother, and the songs of faith and struggle became the foundation of who Johnny Cash would become. These formative years taught him about hardship, love, loss, and the resilience of the human spirit. They were lessons he carried with him into adulthood, shaping not only his music, but also his identity. It was in these fields, under the Arkansas sun, that the story of Johnny Cash truly began. From a young age, Johnny Cash was surrounded by the power of music. His mother, Carrie, was his first teacher, singing gospel hymns that filled their home with messages of faith, hope, and resilience. She recognized Johnny's budding interest in music and encouraged him to explore it. She managed to scrape together enough to buy him a guitar, and it quickly became his most prized possession. With her guidance, Johnny began learning chords and melodies, and soon he was crafting his own songs. By the time he was 12 years old, music had become his refuge, a way to channel the emotions and stories that swirled within him. Johnny was deeply influenced by the gospel music he heard in church and on the radio. The heartfelt lyrics and soul-stirring melodies resonated with him, sparking an early fascination with storytelling. He was drawn to songs that told tales of struggle, redemption, and the human experience, themes that would later define his own work. As he grew older, his love for music only deepened. Even while working long hours in the cotton fields, he would sing to pass the time, weaving his own life into the melodies he hummed. But Johnny's journey to becoming a musician was not a straight path. After graduating high school, he found himself at a crossroads, unsure of what the future held. In 1950, with the Korean War escalating, Johnny made the life-altering decision to enlist in the United States Air Force. It was a decision driven as much by necessity as by patriotism. The military offered him a sense of direction and a steady income. Stationed in West Germany as a Morse code operator, Johnny spent his days intercepting and decoding messages. Though far from the fields of Arkansas, he carried his love of music with him, using his downtime to write songs and refine his craft. During his time in the Air Force, Johnny's passion for storytelling found new depth. Being away from home gave him a unique perspective on life, love, and loss. He poured these reflections into his songwriting, creating a repertoire of deeply personal and relatable pieces. It was during this period that he began to dream of a future where music could be more than a pastime. It could be his calling. Before Johnny left for the military, fate had introduced him to Vivian Liberto, a young woman he met at a roller skating rink in Texas. The two quickly formed a bond, exchanging letters throughout his deployment. Vivian became a beacon of hope and connection for Johnny during his years overseas. When he returned to the United States in 1954, the two wasted no time and got married. Their union marked the beginning of a new chapter in Johnny's life, as he now had both a partner and a growing ambition to make something of himself. With Vivian by his side, Johnny faced the uncertain future ahead. He knew he wanted to pursue music, but had no clear roadmap for how to make it a reality. These early years were filled with determination, sacrifice, and the belief that his voice and stories could one day resonate beyond his small circle. Little did he know, the foundation he was laying during this time would lead to a career that would change the face of music forever. In the early 1950s, Johnny Cash and his young family settled in Memphis, Tennessee. By day, he worked as a door-to-door appliance salesman, but his evenings were reserved for chasing a dream. Inspired by the music he loved and the stories he wanted to tell, Johnny formed a small band with local musicians, determined to make his mark in the burgeoning world of country music. One day, armed with his guitar and an unwavering resolve, Cash walked into Sun Records, a small but vibrant recording studio known for giving fresh talent a chance. The studio's founder, Sam Phillips, was a man with an ear for something different, and Johnny was eager to impress. His first audition was a collection of gospel songs, reflecting the spiritual roots that had shaped him. However, Phillips had a different vision. He famously told Johnny, "Come back when you've lived a little, done some sinning." It wasn't a rejection. It was a challenge to find a sound that was raw, real, and undeniably unique. Taking Phillips' words to heart, Johnny reimagined his approach. He began crafting songs with a sharper edge, weaving elements of country, blues, and the emerging rockabilly style. When he returned to Sun Records, he brought with him "Hey Porter" and "Cry, Cry, Cry," songs that captured a new energy and authenticity. Phillips was impressed, and in 1955, these tracks became Johnny's first recordings. They quickly gained traction, introducing him to a wider audience and setting the stage for what would come next. Sun Records wasn't just a studio. It was a creative hub where some of the greatest musical minds of the era converged. Johnny found himself in the company of legends like Elvis Presley, Carl Perkins, and Jerry Lee Lewis. The atmosphere was electric, and the camaraderie was palpable. One fateful day in 1956, the four of them happened to be in the studio at the same time. What began as a casual gathering turned into an impromptu jam session, with the tape rolling as they played gospel, country, and rock and roll songs together. Years later, this recording would surface as the now iconic $1 Million Quartet, a snapshot of history that captured the energy and spirit of a transformative time in music. Though Johnny was still early in his career, his presence at Sun Records was beginning to pay off. He wasn't just a newcomer. He was carving out a niche that blended traditional storytelling with a fresh, modern sound. His deep, resonant voice and magnetic stage presence made him stand out, and audiences quickly connected with his music. Tracks like Folsom Prison Blues followed, cementing his place as a rising star. The Sun Records era was more than just a starting point for Johnny Cash. It was the crucible where his identity as an artist was forged. It was here that he discovered the power of authenticity and found his voice, not just as a singer, but as a storyteller who could bridge genres and speak directly to the soul of his audience. This was the beginning of Johnny Cash's rise, a journey that would soon take him far beyond the walls of Sun Records and into the annals of music history. Johnny Cash's music carried the weight of hardship and rebellion, and over time, his image began to reflect that same raw defiance. By the late 1950s and early 1960s, he had adopted his signature all-black attire, a striking contrast to the rhinestones and bright colors often worn by his contemporaries. While others dressed to dazzle, Johnny dressed to make a statement. For him, black represented the struggles of the downtrodden, the poor, the prisoners, and those forgotten by society. He became the man in black, a persona that resonated deeply with his fans and underscored his growing outlaw image. However, Cash's life off stage was far more chaotic than the carefully crafted persona he presented to the world. Touring relentlessly, he formed a close bond with fellow musician Waylon Jennings, and together they became notorious for their late nights and hard living. To keep up with the grueling demands of constant performances, Cash began relying on amphetamines. At first, they seemed to fuel his creativity and energy, but over time, the drugs took a toll, amplifying his erratic behavior and sending his life into a downward spiral. Cash's addiction led to a series of run-ins with the law, though most of his offenses were minor. In one infamous incident, he was arrested for trespassing in Starkville, Mississippi, after wandering onto private property to pick flowers. What seemed like a harmless act earned him a night in jail, a story that later became a humorous footnote in his career. But not all of his brushes with the law were so light-hearted. In El Paso, Texas, he was detained at the border for carrying a suspicious stash of pills. Though they were prescription medications, the incident tarnished his reputation and fed into the growing public perception of him as an outlaw. Perhaps the most infamous episode of this period occurred in 1965, during a camping trip in California's Los Padres National Forest. While under the influence, Cash started a fire that quickly got out of control, scorching hundreds of acres of protected land. The blaze caused significant environmental damage, including the displacement of several endangered condors. When questioned by authorities, Cash showed little remorse, reportedly saying, "I don't care about your buzzards." His unapologetic attitude sparked outrage and cemented his reputation as a rebel, though it came at great financial and personal cost. He was sued by the federal government and fined heavily for the destruction. Behind the outlaw facade, Johnny was grappling with deeper struggles. His addiction alienated him from loved ones and pushed his career to the brink. His increasingly reckless behavior was a cry for help, though at the time few could see it for what it was. Cash's transformation into the man in black was more than a style choice. It was a reflection of his internal battles, a man wrestling with his demons while trying to stay true to the principles he held dear. These years were marked by both brilliance and turmoil, as Johnny Cash walked the fine line between self-destruction and redemption. Johnny Cash's connection to those on the margins of society became a defining element of his career, and nowhere was this more evident than in his iconic prison concerts. While his own brushes with the law were relatively minor, often little more than overnight stays behind bars, Cash had a deep empathy for those who had been incarcerated. He saw prisons not just as places of punishment, but as a reflection of societal failings and human vulnerability. This perspective drove him to bring his music to a population that had largely been forgotten. The most famous of these performances took place at Folsom Prison in January 1968. The idea had been years in the making, inspired by his earlier song, Folsom Prison Blues. With its haunting lyrics about regret and consequences, the track had resonated deeply with inmates and fans alike. When Cash finally stepped onto the stage at Folsom, he was met with a thunderous reception from the prisoners. The energy in the room was electric, and the raw, unfiltered recording of that concert captured something rare, a genuine connection between artist and audience. The Folsom performance was followed by another landmark show at San Quentin Prison in 1969. Here, Cash performed for an audience that included a young inmate named Merle Haggard, who would go on to become a country music legend in his own right. These concerts weren't just musical events, they were moments of solidarity, where Cash stood as an advocate for the disenfranchised. He didn't sing to judge or preach. He sang to remind the world that even those behind bars had stories worth telling. These prison concerts became a cornerstone of Johnny Cash's legacy, solidifying his outlaw persona in the public imagination. Ironically, his own experiences with the law were far from the hardened criminal image he projected. Cash's arrests were often the result of personal struggles with addiction or minor infractions, like his infamous flower-picking incident. But his ability to channel the spirit of rebellion and resilience resonated far beyond his actual encounters with the justice system. The recordings from these concerts were not only commercial successes, but cultural milestones. Albums like At Folsom Prison and At San Quentin showcased Cash at his most authentic, a man who could speak to the pain and redemption of others because he had walked close enough to the edge to understand it. The raw, stripped-down sound of these live performances struck a chord with audiences everywhere, and they elevated Cash from a country music star to a symbol of defiance and compassion. Johnny Cash's prison concerts weren't just about music. They were about bridging divides. He gave a voice to those who had been silenced and reminded the world that even in the darkest places, there was still humanity. These performances didn't just shape his career. They redefined the way people saw him, cementing his role as a cultural icon who stood for the forgotten and the flawed. June Carter entered Johnny Cash's life like a whirlwind, a force of nature who seemed to understand him in ways no one else could. Their paths first crossed backstage at the Grand Ole Opry in the mid-1950s. June was already a celebrated performer in her own right, known for her sharp wit, radiant energy, and musical talent. Johnny was captivated from the start, drawn to her humor and warmth. But their relationship was complicated from the beginning. Both were married to other people, and for years, their connection remained an unspoken bond overshadowed by circumstance. As Johnny's career skyrocketed, so did his struggles. His addiction to amphetamines and other substances worsened, and his behavior became increasingly erratic. Despite this, his feelings for June grew stronger, and it was clear she felt the same. But June wasn't willing to give in to her feelings so easily. She saw the destructive path Johnny was on and refused to be part of it unless he made a change. She gave him an ultimatum. He needed to confront his addiction and choose a life of sobriety if he wanted her by his side. It wasn't an easy road. Johnny's battle with addiction had taken a toll on every part of his life, his career, his health, and his relationships. But June wasn't just a bystander. She became his anchor. With the help of her family, she orchestrated interventions and even moved into his home to support him through the hardest moments. Slowly, her unwavering presence began to make a difference. Johnny started to see that his love for June and his desire for a better life were worth fighting for. In 1968, during a performance in London, Ontario, Johnny surprised June by proposing to her on stage. She accepted, and just a week later, they were married in a small ceremony in Kentucky. Their union marked the beginning of a new chapter for Johnny, one that was filled with hope and the promise of redemption. The following year, they welcomed their son, John Carter Cash, into the world. His birth was a turning point for Johnny, who now had another reason to stay on the path of recovery. But addiction is rarely a battle fought just once. Over the years, Johnny faced relapses and setbacks, each one threatening to undo the progress he had made. By the late 1970s, his struggles reached a critical point, and he entered the Betty Ford Clinic for treatment. The road to recovery was long and arduous, marked by moments of triumph and heartbreak. Yet through it all, June remained by his side, her love and faith in him unwavering. June wasn't just Johnny's wife, she was his partner in every sense of the word. She co-wrote songs, performed alongside him, and became his greatest advocate. Their relationship wasn't perfect, it was marked by challenges and mistakes, but it was also a testament to the power of love and perseverance. June's influence on Johnny wasn't just about helping him overcome his demons. It was about showing him a life worth living, a life filled with music, family, and purpose. The story of Johnny and June is one of resilience and redemption. Together they faced the darkness and found a way to let the light in. June Carter wasn't just the love of Johnny Cash's life. She was his greatest inspiration, and the reason he kept fighting when it would have been easier to give up. Their love story became one of the most enduring legacies of his life, a reminder that even in the face of profound struggle, redemption is always possible. In the years after Johnny Cash's passing, his life and legacy continued to reveal surprising layers, adding even more depth to the story of the Man in Black. One of the most unexpected discoveries came from his daughter Rosanne Cash's appearance on the genealogy show Finding Your Roots. Johnny had long claimed to have Cherokee ancestry, a belief he held deeply, and even referenced in his advocacy for Native American rights. However, the results of Rosanne's ancestry research told a different story. Instead of Cherokee roots, the Cash family tree revealed traces of African heritage from centuries past. While this revelation surprised many, it was also a testament to Johnny's universal appeal. His music resonated across boundaries of race and culture, connecting with people from all walks of life. By the time of his later years, Johnny had weathered decades of personal and professional highs and lows. Health problems began to take their toll, particularly his struggles with diabetes, which would eventually lead to his passing. But even as his body weakened, his spirit remained unyielding. In his final years, Johnny poured his remaining energy into his music, recording the American Recording Series with producer Rick Rubin. These stripped-down albums were hauntingly raw, featuring covers of modern songs and deeply personal performances that reflected a lifetime of triumphs, regrets, and redemption. Songs like Hurt showcased his vulnerability and cemented his status as an artist who never stopped pushing boundaries, even in the face of mortality. As his health deteriorated, Johnny faced one of the greatest losses of his life: June Carter Cash's passing in May 2003. Her death devastated him, but it also became a catalyst for some of his most poignant work. Johnny continued recording until his own death just 4 months later, leaving behind a body of work that would serve as both a farewell and a lasting testament to his artistry. Even as these emotional moments defined the end of his life, Johnny's lighter, rebellious side found a unique way to live on. One of the more unusual tributes to his legacy came from the town of Starkville, Mississippi. Decades earlier, Johnny had been arrested there for trespassing after picking flowers on private property, a minor and almost humorous offense that had grown into a legendary anecdote. In 2007, Starkville embraced the story by hosting the Johnny Cash Flower Picking Festival, a celebration that honored his memory with a tongue-in-cheek nod to his mischievous spirit. The town even issued a symbolic pardon for the misdemeanor, turning a small moment of rebellion into a quirky piece of history that endeared him even more to fans. Johnny Cash's final chapter was a reflection of the man he had always been: resilient, introspective, and deeply connected to the human experience. His life was filled with contradictions, yet it was these very complexities that made him so relatable and unforgettable. From his surprising ancestral roots to his unflinching honesty in his later music, Johnny's legacy continues to evolve, revealing new facets of a man whose story will never stop being told. Even in death, Johnny Cash remains a cultural icon, his voice echoing through generations, reminding us of the beauty in imperfection and the enduring power of redemption. Johnny Cash was far more than just a musician. He was a voice for the voiceless, a chronicler of struggles and triumphs that resonated with millions around the world. His songs told stories of love, loss, redemption, and rebellion, drawing from a life that was as complex as the emotions he captured in his music. He stood unapologetically as a symbol of resilience, embracing his flaws and using them to connect with the human condition in a way few artists ever could. In his final years, Cash's music took on an even deeper poignancy, as he reflected on the joys and sorrows of a lifetime lived to its fullest. Tracks like Hurt showcased a man unafraid to bare his soul, to confront mortality, and to leave behind a legacy of honesty and authenticity. Through every note and lyric, Cash reminded the world that imperfection is not a weakness, but a testament to the beauty of being human. Even now, his influence continues to ripple across generations, inspiring countless artists and touching the hearts of fans old and new. Johnny Cash's legacy isn't just his music. It's the enduring spirit of a man who stood for the broken and the forgotten, who faced his demons with courage, and who never stopped believing in the power of redemption. Johnny Cash showed us that life's imperfections are where its greatest stories are found. His voice may have been silenced, but his spirit remains louder than ever, echoing through every chord, every verse, and every life he touched. His story is a reminder that even the darkest paths can lead to light, and that every soul has the power to leave an indelible mark on the world.